2025. Happy New Year. Roll call, please. Alphabetical.
Clark Brewer here.
Tom Callahan here.
Amy Glassmeyer here.
Kevin Hine here.
Deirdre Hobson here.
Okay, and then we're joined by town planner Cassandra Thayer and our town council Carolyn Murray. I'm gonna share the screen. Isn't that coming up?
You're already sharing.
Is it? Where is it? Why can't I see it?
Turn your computer on. No, I'm
I can
kidding.
see the Word document. I can see your mouse moving.
Yeah, you're basically have a table of contents.
Mhm.
Tom, for the purposes of this meeting tonight, can you please give us a preview of what's going to happen?
To the extent that's not yet understandable, sure. We're here to address an update to our planning board regulations. After the last meeting, I have redlined everything that's new and different. And what you have before you is another version that Cassandra has marked up. And most of that, I think, Cassandra, correct me wrong, is on the first section. And Amy has,
Believe, yeah, I think most of the markups that I had done are actually within the pre-existing subdivision regulations,
Yeah.
whereas it was numbers of copies and things like that.
Alright, that's-
Anything in blue is from Amy.
yeah, and then Amy has put in some edits here and there as well. So the intent is tonight is to go through them and vote on them and pass them. That's the plan, so if we can get started, has everybody read them, just unlike last time?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, the first section is new. That's why it's all red. And it's basically to put on paper what we don't have on paper at the moment, which is all of our standard requirements for how applications should be submitted. And where Cassandra has edited in blue, I am perfectly fine with, because Cassandra is the one who has to deal with it in the office every day, and she knows what we need and what we want. And the same if Cassandra's made similar changes to the subdivision regs. You know, she knows best what we need for copies and documentation, so. Again, if you go through it, I don't know if anybody has any particular questions. I always have to point out that this subsection E, cross-board consistency, that goes back to 92 or 3. I used to call that the so-and-so rule. Was named after a particular individual who showed up to 3 different boards with 3 different sets of plans for the permits for the same project. And it was very underhanded and sneaky, and I haven't seen it happen in this town. I have seen it happen in other towns, but it's just put in there to prevent that from ever happening again, or at least making it clear that it wasn't acceptable. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on section 1.
Could I make a general comment?
Of course.
It would make it so, because I went through and looked at the use of acronyms and not knowing whether or not it's convention to spell out acronyms, I would like to make a request, or I might even say a motion, to accept a standardized practice of acronym utilization in the regulations. Not just have them so that somebody has to go search for them, but there should always be their first reference, that it be described, and then you can use it as an acronym. But until then, nobody knows what it is.
You have the acronym, and then in parentheses what it really means, and then you can use the acronym throughout the document.
It's actually the reverse. You give the term its due, and then you give it its acronym, and ever forward, the acronym is used.
Okay?
So
If
that
you
way
want-
you can just
you-
say, we can basically vote on an acronym.
Is there something in particular you're referring to instead of the abstract?
Well, there's lots of acronyms associated with different functions or aspects of the planning board business. And a regular citizen is not going to know what an acronym of something with 3 letters means. So if we just
I
actually-
understand that. When we come to one and you want to point it out, point it out. But until
No,
I
I want to use a convention. We should have a convention, which is a standard literary convention.
So can I just say that, Cassandra, if you don't mind, hon, if as this is going, you're going through these, the first time something is used, you write the full name out, in parentheses, you write the acronym, and after that, then the acronym is used for that. That's just something that's easy to do. It's done in
Yes.
all kinds of, okay.
I understand that I
I
do that
did it.
more every day of the week, but again,
Yeah.
I'm not dealing with abstracts here. I'm dealing with text that's on the
Concrete.
page in front of you, and when you find one to point it out, we'll make the change. But until then, I don't want to sit here and argue about abstracts.
It's,
I made
Well,
the
why don't you-
convention.
I agree with the concept, but
Go
we'll
ahead.
point it out as we go through all of these different sections. When one comes up and it's not properly identified to what the acronym means, we'll make the change right here, right now.
I made them.
Let's do it.
All right. All right, so with respect to section 1, well, again, I don't assume there's any objection to the changes in.
I have one other one, which is to specify the datum year with a definition and an
Would
explanation.
you let
and a
me
datum
get
and a
to it?
footnote.
Would you let me get to it?
please, but just be nice.
God,
Tom.
I have 2 sets of edits from Cassandra and from you, Amy. I'm dealing with Cassandra's at the moment, and I'm going to deal with yours next. Sorry, I can't, oh, never mind. I'm going to assume on this section 1 that no one has an objection to Cassandra's edits, because again, she's the one working with this on a day-to-day basis.
I read them all.
All right. Now, Amy, you made a highlight at the top. You've crossed out Word and PDF format.
That's actually the only edit that I made. Everything in blue is Amy.
Everything blue is, so I just got the reverse of what I just said.
Yes, the purple is me. I only edited that one
Purple.
sentence. Everything else is Amy.
All right, so what do you want to change it to? Just
I would like to, well,
shall be submitted digitally, period? Is that the change?
That was my recommendation, that we don't need to specify the type of formatting. Preferred format is typically PDF, but I think, with the changing times, that could change in the future, and it doesn't make sense to specify.
Not a problem. I can't seem to edit this while I'm going. Great. All right. All right, who wrote the next one? Specify the datum year.
I did. Amy did.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well,
What do you want to
It's
see
just a
changed?
convention, Tom, for surveys.
Okay. And
what
does
would be,
the term sea level datum not imply that or include that?
No.
no, the public would not know what that means.
What
So put
is,
a footnote in and describe what it is and give it its date as it's applied to what we're doing.
what's the language that needs to be there? Clark?
What's written there referred to as mean sea level datum, specify the year. That's all you need.
Specify what year, the current year?
NVDA, it's NVDA like 1988. And then there's like a new one.
Right. I think it's 2010, but I'm not sure. I could check.
Does
Yeah.
that change the, does that change the?
That's fine.
Okay. All right, I mean, most of this, the next ones look like grammar changes. All documents from relative boards must be simultaneously delivered. What does that mean? What are we getting from all relevant boards? Hello?
Who are you addressing?
Paragraph E, paragraph E. You've included the phrase, all documents from all relevant boards must be delivered simultaneously. What does that mean?
What it means to me is that instead of the information on a case-by-case basis going in a sequence out to the different boards, having all boards receive all information simultaneously. What Cassandra does when she distributes to us, she could distribute to all of the boards that are relevant.
Right, but each board has their own timeline, filing dates,
Yeah.
filing times,
I am not dictating
schedule
other-
once a month, every other week, that kind of thing. And
Oh,
it hypothetically, if another board like the ZBA was going to review a special permit that we were doing, that would be fine. But if the ZBA was doing their own special permit and we were doing a special permit, then those documents and the needs of each board might be slightly different. So it's entirely possible that the same document might not actually work for every single board. Certainly, Board of Health has different issues than Concom, and ZBA and Planning Board.
Yes,
this-
and,
this- this sentence that's highlighted is unnecessary, given the content of the rest of the section.
if you read closely what I wrote that all documents from all relevant boards must be simultaneously delivered. I did not say all boards at all times. I said all those that are relevant. We've had problems.
There's-
And
there's different-
the whole, if you read all of section E, it says that. And this is worded documents from all relative boards. We're not receiving documents from other boards, nor are we going to dictate what other boards do in these regulations. This is for us. And the whole point of subsection E is to simply make sure that an applicant is honest with us and gives us the same material for the same project that they're giving. Because of something that happened on a board that I was on 32 years ago. That's why that's there.
Yeah, and an extra issue might not necessarily be that critical for this first round through our regulations. I mean, since we're just on the first section and
I
there's
had to run away from.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's just
if
move
we're on
on.
the first section and there's at least 15 sections, then, you know, I think we should try and get 95% of it right, but realizing that we could tweak it on an annual or semi-annual basis as the board sees fit, or if issues arise from what we've put in place.
And I look at the changes in G's just being grammatical.
I mean, the purpose of having this, Tom, is that we don't have to vote on it at a town meeting. We can change it and at any time that it seems to like to be the appropriate time
Fine.
or issues
Right.
come up with
That's
it.
that's the whole point. All right,
That is the whole point.
all
Well,
right,
there's other points, right?
all right. Section, you want to vote on each section separately because they all stand alone, independent of each other.
Fine with me.
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve this new planning board regulation subsection 1 that's before you as edited.
Second,
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Clark Brewer, aye.
All right. All opposed?
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Oh, but yeah, let's do it alphabetical roll call. I'm sorry. Clark, go ahead.
I already said aye.
Aye, all right, Clark, aye, Tom, aye, Amy, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, I.
All right, thank you. All right, section 2 is just to add some supplemental, well, and section 3 is the same principle, supplemental application materials that are not stated in the bylaw that would be useful to us. Most importantly to me, it'd be a narrative description. I want people to explain in writing what they're doing, not just listen to what they say at a public hearing. So,
What happened to the variance section?
Carolyn and I discussed this at length. We're not doing regulations that solely the zoning board deal with.
Okay,
I mean, my
that
hope
might
is,
come up.
my original hope was to have one.
I know.
document that
I
had
know, I know.
all the land use boards, but
So
obviously.
I'm just crossing it off of my copy.
No, they all just have to pass their own stuff, so that I always knew, but so. We're taking out anything that's I said that at the top, that it's anything that's referencing the zoning board.
Planning board doesn't grant variances.
No, no. No,
Okay.
but it was an attempt to put all zoning regulations in one place originally, but never mind, so. This
Fine.
is just going to apply to the planning board. I have no problems with the blue edits, so, again. You know, for the 4 bullet points are the identical for both of these, but you know, this is. Additional application material that's not in the bylaw that I think we would all find useful. When we have special permits and site plan reviews. So,
Excuse me, Tom, something that I didn't realize until I just looked at this was for site plan review. You have the same first sentence under the bullet point, a narrative description of the relief requested and justification for its granting. And generally speaking, it's different than variances and special permits where you have to do a site plan review. It's a review, and I think the language should probably reflect that of the first bullet point. It's not actually, it's not really relief. It's
yeah.
it's a review. So yeah, a description of the project, and then
It can simply be project period.
yep, that's it.
Okay. All right, any other questions, comments about these 2 sections?
Nope.
All right, I'll make a motion then that we approve as new regulations, section 2, dealing with special permits, and section 3, dealing with site plan reviews, as in front of you, as edited.
Second,
Right. All in favor, alphabetical please.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan,
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, I.
Okay, thank you. Section 4 and 5 are the stuff we moved over in the warrant article. We took us, you know, the town meeting did a specific vote to move specific material. So Amy, I don't think accepting your edits is appropriate right now for this. Because this is what town meeting told us to move. So.
Well, we can
wanna-
change it. We can change it at any time if it's a regulation.
Correct. So I would move section 4 and 5 to be approved without the blue edits.
Tom, just a clarification, section 4 and 5 are the exact language that was in the zoning bylaw without
Yep.
any modifications?
No.
Okay, then I'll second that.
Can I make a point here?
Yeah,
Can someone tell me or point where GMSP is in its first occurrence spelled out?
well, it is defined in the bylaw.
Okay, but is it defined the way it stands alone here for someone
No,
that's not familiar with
it's
it?
not because it was part of the bylaw where it was defined, so.
Yeah, but nobody's gonna look back at that.
Right, so,
All right, Amy.
my
after-
point,
next
my
week-
point is I'd like to
next
see it
week-
defined here.
Next week, go ahead and change them. But right now, for tonight's purposes, I do not think we can edit what town meeting has told us to move at this juncture. Carolyn
I
can tell
wouldn't
me.
see why not, Tom.
Yeah,
well,
at the
Carolyn,
first
can we do it?
occurrence, at the first occurrence of an undefined acronym, it's standard convention to spell it out. That would be within the purview of whatever you're moving over, Tom. Don't even think council would need to explain that to us.
Wait, do we have counsel here?
You
Yeah.
do.
Oh, but you just got not,
Yes.
you
Yes.
just got not even needed to explain.
No, you're in the midst of your public hearing on proposed regulations. You can make any changes you want, whether it's to acronyms or anything else tonight.
Here it is, it's ground mounted solar panels, isn't it?
I think solar photovoltaic, photovoltaic.
Yeah, I did not
Wow.
change,
Who-
I did
who's a
not
good
add the
speller?
word.
No, here it is, that's the way, that's what it is.
That looks great. Thank you.
So then, if that's being said, then all the other blue stuff can stay. Let me just cross that out. And then let me just go down for, in the wind, is there anything, and I don't think there's any acronym in the wind one.
Just one more thing. It seems like in the first paragraph, like you have in other sections, you should cross-reference what the relevant zoning bylaw section is. I'm sorry, for ground solar.
In the wind one, I'm changing the LJT altogether to large turbine, because that's how it's now referred to in the bylaw.
Does that make sense to everybody to put in, to cross-reference the actual solar,
Yeah, where it's appropriate, yes. I agree.
solar
Yep.
zoning bylaw section? And I don't even know where it lives right now. I'd have to go through the,
No, I can do that, that's easy, so. Well, actually, I'll do it for you right here.
same for the wind.
Please, come on. Sorry. This is supposed to, what am I supposed to do? Right. Amy, there was
Thanks.
something, Amy, there was one thing in the solar, I just, as I was passing through it, that you highlighted. Is there a point to the highlight?
I think it was a question about plural versus singular. but I'm not sure. I'd have to,
Fails shall be deemed.
where it fails or operations are discontinued.
When it fails to operate, operate would be singular. All right. I just gotta go through the wind one and change LGTs to large turbines every time it shows up. All right, any other questions about these two? So we're free to make changes from what we've moved over to town meeting. I'll accept all the blue edits. Anything else on these two?
Nope.
All right, then I'll move that the planning board adopt as new regulations, sections, what is it? What did I just say? 4 and 5 regarding solar special permits and wind special permits.
Second,
This one. I might have to change this one. I don't know if that's the first place SPG. I'll double check that. All right, all in favor, just say aye.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Callahan,
Amy Glassmar, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, I.
aye. Okay, thank you. I'll go back and catch the rest of this. I'm not gonna deal with it right now. All right, the next one, section 6, was similarly to add some additional application requirements for special permits and site plans in the village and harbor districts. I don't think we need to spell out these, but I'll do it. It should have me.
Similar set of requests for Route 3A districts.
Yeah, there are. Right here under this, this one, aren't these items under the jurisdiction of Concom? It's not intended to make any judgment about Concom jurisdiction. It's simply to have a site plan that's thorough, that has all the required important landmarks. Just because we request a plan that has those landmarks doesn't mean we're regulating anything that goes on with them in the way Concom would. So, I don't. You know,
Yeah, just as in some cases, stormwater is a part of our review and purview for subdivision, in addition to Concom's jurisdiction on stormwater.
well, and then the key thing for this one is to not that it matters too much based on an SJC decision I read today, but the design guideline, you know, I'll just mention that as an aside. The SJC finally decided the Milton case challenging the MBTA Communities District. And they decided it's constitutional, which doesn't surprise me, and that the Attorney General has the authority to enforce it, which was also being challenged. But they also said that the guidelines, quote unquote, that EOH, whatever it's called now, promulgated are not in effect, because calling them guidelines was cute, but actually they're regulations, and there's a certain process you have to go to in the state law to promulgate state regulations. So the bylaw, I mean, the state statutes in effect and the Attorney General's enforcement power is in effect, but the guidelines are right at the moment, not in effect. And they just have to re-promulgate them in the proper procedure under the Administrative Procedure Act. So that also tells me that calling something guidelines instead of regulations is almost usually a regulation, particularly if you require it. So this will make that clear for both for the village and the harbor, that the guidelines would now become regulations. So whether you separately then go through that, and I know it was updated in what, Clark, 2018, something like that, 2018 or 19.
Something like that, but adopted.
Yeah,
At
so I
that
mean, if
point.
you guys want to go through those again and see if anything needs to be updated, that's fine.
So Tom, just so I understand, just to demonstrate that I was listening to what you said, you're saying that the state is saying a guideline should be a regulation
I'm saying
so
that
that it's enforceable.
I'm not thinking, I don't think that the court said that was a blanket rule in all things, but what they said is that what EOH, whatever it is, did by calling it guidelines does not work because there were a lot of mandatory things in it, so that makes them regulations, and therefore they had to go through the Administrative Procedures Act process.
Okay, but you're thinking it relates to our design guidelines
I
in the
think that
village?
you have to be careful if you're going to, I mean, what that decision tells me reading between the lines, and this is just my opinion, Carolyn may differ, but if you have guidelines that you're going to make mandatory on somebody, they're really a regulation. And so they have to be promulgated in a certain way under state law.
Well, I mean, I think the intent of our design guidelines is that they're not optional, but they're recommendations.
Yeah, well,
To follow. It's
making-
something that gives applicants a sense for what to do to make us happy, so to speak.
Yeah, this
But
would,
I still think it wouldn't be a regulation, but
yeah, well,
does
this
council have any comment on this particular
makes it
thing?
clear.
Yeah, I was just kind of smirking, Clark, at your, well, they're not optional, or if the design guidelines provide no flexibility, meaning you must comply with them, then they're mandatory. Then with all due respect, they are regulations.
Right, not a
So-
guideline anymore.
Right. So a guideline, a rule, a policy, a recommendation, whatever we want to call it, the term you assign to it is not dispositive. It's really whether or not this is something that is truly merely a suggestion to follow, or whether this is something that is mandatory and a basis for us to reject your project, for example.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, as an architect, using design guidelines to design projects, you follow those guidelines unless there's a really compelling reason not to. And if there was a specific project in a specific location or context where somehow the guidelines conflicted with a design solution that was contextual and seemed to fit and checked all the boxes, then you'd make the case for it, for not complying with the guidelines.
Well, then you also raise another point, which has to do with waivers. So if the guidelines are merely suggestions, then they don't have to be followed to the letter of the guideline. But if the guideline is mandatory and there is no flexibility about compliance, then the question becomes, do you want to have some built-in flexibility by allowing for waivers so that if there is a legitimate public interest, like with the subdivision regulations, if it is in the public interest, a subdivision regulation can be waived. So, we could think about whether or not there should be some standard for a waiver where maybe it's not practical for some reason.
Right.
Going back to section 1, I just thought about that. I thought there was a section about waivers in here, but
There is a section later on, Tom, about waivers in the document, but as I remember, it really goes to being able to waive strict compliance with like the application requirements, not necessarily being able to waive like any of the, more substantive requirements.
Well, you know what? I'll leave the issue of waivers for you guys to deal with after all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say everybody at this point understands the nomenclature of a guideline that you follow it unless there's a really good reason not to. It's
Right, but the
not an
proposal-
absolute requirement, but it's pretty close to that. So, I mean, I'm comfortable with the term guideline, even if it's there may be some issues with it relative to the housing choice appeal by Milton.
Yeah, I that's just my spin on it.
Mhm.
You know, they basically.
Something to think about for the
We told the
future.
state agency, you got cute by calling them guidelines instead of regulations. And the AG argued to the SJC, well, you substantially complied with the Administrative Procedures Act. And the court said, no, you didn't, because it's pretty strict and you had to do a public hearing and submit it to the Secretary of the Commonwealth, blah, 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 blah. So they basically told them in that one instance they were getting cute. But I think
Right.
the underlying substance of it was that if it's substantive and mandatory, it is really a regulation, not a guideline.
Right, but for both, well, except for the 3A district, both the harbor and the village, there's very little expansion ability left in either location. If you look at, on a parcel by parcel basis, yes, there's some, and we certainly wouldn't get rid of our guidelines. But I don't think there's any benefit at this point, or overwhelming concern about somebody going in and trying to build some modernist Frank Gehry reflective phenomenon in either location.
Well, you know, the proposal I had here in this subsection B, both in this section and the next section, is to take away any dispute about the nomenclature and say they are regulations. But what's the board's pleasure?
But my recommendation would be to leave it as guidelines.
Anybody else?
If this is a learning point and we can take an opportunity to learn from the decision today, why not implement the change and understand guidelines? While that might be a guide, if it's not required, then that's where it should continue to be used as a guideline. But if we're requiring something like the point taken today and discussed is a regulation, that's stated as such, as a regulation.
The language here just refers to the guidelines. It actually doesn't say they are now regulations in so many words other than that they appear here. So just please refer to it, and if they're the guidelines, fine. I would say leave this paragraph as is and treat them as guidelines. Now, the only reason they're being renamed is because in the next section, we're proposing extending the design guidelines to 3A, which, as any reader of Cohasset 143 has observed, has been something that has been talked about for a while in relation to the office build, the mixed-use building at the Stop and Shop Plaza, which many people find ugly. So I guess the next question is, what's everybody's thought on extending the guidelines to 3A? And it would be for the commercial projects and for the MBTA overlay.
Yeah, geez, I mean, Route 3A is the Wild West. It's not cute. It's in terms of economic development or what was originally planned for the village and as well as the harbor. There was never a goal of them of it looking good. And I would think that if we had design guidelines for our highway, they would be different somehow. On the other hand, if it's still a guideline, then maybe there's the an initial more likely that they would not be followed. So I'd say it does no harm to put them in and then see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's better than nothing, and, you know, the aesthetics of the building at the Stop and Shop Plaza, I suppose, are in the eyes of the beholder. The supermarket building and the other building that was originally there that has the restaurant,
You know, it doesn't really look
they were
like
designed
the
together.
renderings that we saw on the approved plans. What what we got does not look like those renderings.
Yeah, well, so I
But
mean, I think what
Be
you,
that as it may, it
yeah,
is
I
what it
think
is.
extending them makes sense for the moment, and then, you know, going forward.
Okay with that.
Going forward, somebody should take on a look at those standard guidelines and say, do we need something specific for 3A? And, you know, I hate to volunteer you for that, Clark, but
No, you volunteered me about 10 times.
you're
over
the
last 4
architect.
years, Tom.
You're the
And
architect.
each time I say, maybe.
Okay, well, anyway, if everybody's okay with that, we'll leave B into both of those sections, so. All right, now in section 7, with respect to 3A, Amy has some comments here that we're gonna go. We need to be careful about which goes board goes first. There is no regulation that says any board goes first.
I,
This is,
I
this,
cannot-
first of all, this particular section in the application is only dealing with the 2, 3A districts. That's number one. So I don't know why the Harbor and 602 Black Rock Road come into this comment, but nothing in here is intending to make us first or them first. That has been an age-old battle that.
Tom, you and I already talked about this today. We don't need to talk about it any further. If you want to strike it, strike it.
And then for the same reason we just talked about in the previous section, we do want some we still want site condition. This ends abruptly. Yeah, because that's all a summary of the environmental concerns related to the site. What else do you want it to say? Particularly on 3A with commercial sites, there may be environmental issues that we should be aware of when we're dealing with a site plan and new construction or reconstruction. And this is simply saying, you know, bring those to our attention. Like if there's an underground storage tank, or there used to be, or there's a plume of nasty stuff under the ground. That's all that's intended to do. All right. Anything else regarding 6 and 7? All right, I'll make a motion to approve as new regulations, sections 6 and 7 relating to the Village, Harbor, and the 3A districts as edited on the screen. That's the motion, so.
Second?
So moved.
You know, who is that?
Second,
Okay, thanks. All right, all in favor?
Clark Brewer, aye.
Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, I.
Thank you.
Tom, can I interrupt for 1 second? I don't know if there's anyone in the public who's out there or not, or if Cassandra's keeping an eye on whether there's anyone who wants to make any comment.
All right.
There's
yeah,
one other person in the audience. They haven't raised their hand at all. Nobody's
Okay.
utilized the Q&A.
Yeah, I apologize. I can't see that right now.
Okay, thanks for checking.
Yeah, just let me know if anybody, I'll mention something before we finish up.
Of course.
All right, the marijuana special permits is, those are planning board special permits, correct? Not zoning board. Pretty sure they are. Again, this was to fill in things we don't have. How many of these have we ever seen? I've never seen one. Have we ever seen one? So again, this is just to put in case you do get an application for one of these, it's just to put in some additional application materials that are not set out in the bylaw. And I see the RMD, yes, I need to know, that's in the bylaw. The RMD is defined in the bylaw, I gotta find definite what it is. What is it regulated marijuana dispensary, Carolyn?
I think recreational marijuana dispensary is what it is.
We don't have a recreational.
No, again, wrong spot.
We
No,
only have-
this was just anticipatory. If you ever had one of these applications, we do not have any, we haven't permitted any. And this is just a supplement of information that might be useful in evaluating such an application. If you don't want to put it in at all, you don't have to.
Well, if we don't allow recreational marijuana in Cohasset, then why would we put it in? If it's related to medical marijuana, which we
We have
had
a
to put in
bylaw. We have a bylaw on the subject, believe it or
for
not.
recreational?
I believe so.
No, because we voted, I guess, if people voted with less than a majority for recreational marijuana, then you didn't have to allow it in your zoning. But Carolyn could probably fill in the blanks on this.
Yeah,
Don't
I'm-
just
I'm-
take it from me.
No, I'm just looking, because when you mentioned who's the special permit granting authority, you know, at least under your general bylaws, you've prohibited all marijuana establishments.
okay. Well, never mind, and this is.
So, and I'm not seeing anything coming up under your zoning bylaw.
Yeah, and this is an easy one to delete.
Well,
Okay,
we had medical marijuana
Yep,
that was approved, zoning
yeah,
wise,
that's part
because it
of,
was a requirement to approve it.
all right, when I originally drafted this next section regarding residential cluster developments, that was done in the same thought that we were gonna move a lot of stuff out of the bylaw into regulations like we did with wind and solar, but we never did that, so all of this stuff is in the bylaw for the moment, and someday in the future, if you want to move it to regulations, you can. Okay, so common driveways. This is one of our few existing regulations. And I don't think we need any of these comments anymore. This will now become section 8, since we're getting rid of the marijuana thing. But the changes here and the redlining and everything else is all done to correspond with the change made in the bylaw in section right here, 4.3B3, that was made a year ago. So if you recall, we limited basically the number of houses that could be served to 4. So this chart goes, and what it does is adopt those design standards. One of those design standards is further down. These shall be no longer than 750 feet is taken out of the regulation because it's now in the bylaw. When the bylaw was rewritten, it was put into the bylaw. So, Amy, what's this comment in blue here?
Well, one of the things that I think, this is a personal issue, is that it is not clear to me whether or not we have a responsibility to the public to notify them of the various encumbrances on their participation in a common driveway.
Carolyn, correct me if you're wrong or if you differ, but the answer to that is no.
No, I don't think there's any affirmative obligation on the part of the board. I mean, if someone is seeking a common driveway application, it's up to their counsel or whoever they have representing them to take care of the cross easements and whatever the maintenance agreement might be. I don't think we want to get into those kind of private contractual situations.
As a practical matter, I mean, if you're seeing one of these applications, it's probably in connection with some new construction. And, you know, and thus new lots with new deeds, and the deeds will reflect that there's an easement to use this common driveway, and then usually a maintenance agreement is 9 times out of 10 an aside agreement, not in the deed, but those are all legal relationships between the various property owners, and at the time the common driveway is permitted by, you know, the developer seeking it, you might not know who the future owners who are going to be using it are. So I don't think as part of our permitting process, it's something we need to, should get into. All right. I changed references to the highway surveyor, both in this one and in the, a lot of this is the existing one. It's just really the changes were up front based on the bylaw change, limiting the number of lots that are, can use a common driveway. But like, because I'm using a lot of the old existing common driveway regs, the references to the highway surveyor have to go and be replaced by Department of Public Works. And that same change is made throughout the subdivision regs because they refer to the highway surveyor left and right. All right, any further questions, comments about the common driveway? And again, one of the purposes of this is to have all the regulations in one place. Right now, we have a separate document, common driveway regs. We have a separate document, subdivision regs. And
Sorry, Tom, I got distracted. And did we vote on the accessory dwelling or cluster?
no, I said the accessory dwelling is under the zoning board's purview, so that's out. And the cluster development proposed regulation was written long ago when I originally anticipated doing the same thing to that bylaw as we did to wind and solar, which was to move a lot of junk out of the bylaw and into regulations. That never happened, so
Okay,
therefore that regulation is not needed. All right,
thank you.
so we're just now moving up to common driveway becomes the new section 8 of the regulations. All right, I don't know if this acronym, this is a federal environmental acronym, I can figure out what it is. It's national something. I can figure that out. All right. Any other questions about the common driveways?
No,
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve the amendment to the common driveway regs to become section 8 in this compilation of regulations.
second,
Okay, all in favor?
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, I.
Okay, thank you. All right. Last but not least, again, on the theory of moving it into one place, we have the subdivision control regulations. Now, a couple of things about this. We have a very long bylaw, chapter 325 of the town bylaws. And we have a long set of regulations. I was discussing this with Amy yesterday and pointed out, you know, how this whole thing is over 30 pages. Well, the subdivision regs by themselves are over 30 pages. That's what creates all this length. And I don't know when the last time they were substantively updated. There are no substantive changes in here. It's just moving around, and the place where I mentioned a couple of minutes ago where it says highway surveyor, it's been changed to Department of Public Works. If it says Board of Health, it's been changed to Board of Public Health. That's it.
I
But the
think we
intent
did
here-
maybe 10 or 12 years ago, Tom. We did
Yeah,
another
and
hearing.
then again, whether you whether you need to substantively review them, and especially in light of what might be coming down the pike on Jerusalem Road, that's a different question for a different night. This is just a housekeeping thing and filling the intent of having all the regulations in one place. But the other organizational changes I'm proposing here is when you pick up the paper copy of the current subdivision regs, it's daunting. And again, it's all the same material is here. It's just that what I have done is break it up into 4 pieces. So again, in a subdivision, anybody proposing a subdivision is 99% of the time going to have expert engineers and surveyors and attorneys representing. But what I suggested doing is breaking it up for the general public to make it easier to follow, is breaking it up into its 4 constituent parts. One is the general provisions that are applied to the whole process. It's a lot of application type of material. Then there's the A&R process, the preliminary plan process, and the definitive plan process. So I went through the existing and simply broke it up into 4 separate sections. Again, on the theory that this is going to be more user-friendly to the layperson. I don't think it'll make a difference one way or the other. But even I,
Excuse
as
me.
as an attorney, found reading the current 12-year-old, however old it is.
Excuse me,
document.
Tom.
Yeah.
The thing I noticed about what was in the regulations is also repeated under the zoning bylaw.
Well,
And to the extent that we need, we don't want to have confusion between what's an approved bylaw and the regulation.
All right, so Carolyn and I discussed that, and I'll bring it up on the screen in a moment. I have a warrant article. So Carol and I discussed that very point, because if you make changes to one and you don't make it to the other, you have the possibility of conflict and confusion.
Right?
And Carolyn pointed out to me, Carolyn, correct me if I'm wrong, that most towns don't even have a bylaw. They don't have a chapter 325 like we do. So what the state subdivision control law says, it empowers planning boards to promulgate rules and regulations, which we have done and which every other town has done. Doesn't say you have to have a bylaw. And Carolyn, correct me if I mischaracterizing what you told me, but most towns don't have a bylaw.
Correct.
So let me
I don't remember voting on the subdivision control bylaw at town meeting.
well, here,
Is it possible that we took our regulation and gave it to E-Code 360 and said, yeah, put this in our bylaws, when it was never a voted? I mean, I hate to say, yeah, I've been on the planning board too long, but this
All right,
may be an example.
Here's what
It's
here's-
possible. I'm just sorry, Tom. I'm
Yeah.
just looking at the E code, their so-called legislative history for chapter 325. It simply says adopted by the planning board in 1989 and then dates that it was amended. It doesn't actually mention town meeting.
Exactly.
Well, so
Wow.
here's what I would suggest, and here's what's in front of you. It's one of 2 things. Given that it probably was never passed by town meeting, you
Mhm.
could have a vote to just eliminate chapter 325 of the town bylaws.
So why is it in the bylaw? Yeah.
Eliminate it completely. But if not, what I would propose is a warrant. So right now, chapter 325 has 46 sections. 325-1 through 325-46. And it's all repetitive of the stuff that's in the regulations. I would propose that if you're going to keep chapter 325, you have this motion to delete 324-4, section 4 through section 46. Just leave the first 3 sections, which basically just talk about the subdivision control law and the planning board's authority. That's it. And that's consistent with the bylaws purpose. This is set out just the general parameters of what the authority is and what you're trying to do. But the meat and the bones is in the regulations. And the regulations, of course, are easier to amend as you need to as time goes on. So that would be the choice. So I'll leave that to you. I'll leave you this article if you want to keep 325, but I think you'd be safe in deleting 325 altogether if you wish to do so. Okay. And stop the share of that and go back. Hello, Brigitte. So go back to the regulations. So going back to the regulations. I just need to, be renumbered, but again, it's just right now chopping it up into, breaking it down into its 4 parts. That the sole purpose of that is to make it somewhat more user-friendly to a non-professional. Or even in my own admission, to a professional. I found going through that paper document to be excruciatingly difficult.
Well, I mean, it seems like if that's a decision to make, and what you're saying, Tom, is, you could get rid of 325 and then adopt these instead, and then that would remove any redundancy.
Yeah, you have these now. You have these now. All this is proposing to you is just to reorganize them into this broken up pieces.
So you're saying everything in 325 is in these 4 sections?
Yes, everything in the existing regulations is in these 4 sections. And the only text changes is to change old references to boards or positions like the highway surveyor that no longer have authority. I did not address any of the substance of whether what you're looking at is appropriate, whether the application materials you're getting is appropriate. They're very, very detailed, obviously, and I don't know that you would need to change them, but if they substantively haven't been looked at in 12 years plus, and you have a potentially 20+ unit subdivision coming up, you might hire somebody to take a look at them. But what you have in front of you is simply housekeeping and reorganization of them, not substantive change. What you do then with chapter 325 of the bylaw is for you to decide in the spring. And you could either, like I said, get rid of it or chop it down considerably in the way that I wrote out. And then you'll get rid of.
So Tom, are you recommending that
I'm
we take a
recommending
look
that-
at the 325 and compare what you've done in a detailed
No,
side-by-side manner?
No, this
right
is
now?
not, this is not, no, this is not 325. This is the language in the separate document called the subdivision rules and regulations that you can find on our planning board website. It is, I simply rewrote and reorganized the regulations. I did not touch 325. But to the extent there's the risk.
You can't, because it exists in the E code 360.
I know, but the E code 3, again, nobody knows how it got into E code 360.
Well,
It-
Carolyn just confirmed that it wasn't voted at town
Yeah,
meeting.
all right, so it's a
It's a
mistake.
regulation that got included in the general bylaw when it
Yeah,
was
and it
the
shouldn't
general
be, and
bylaw.
it shouldn't be there. So what I would suggest to you is get rid of it. Get rid of 325 and simply have your regulations as you've always had. And that's what these are in front of you tonight. These are the regulations from the separate document. It is not the 325 language. And to the extent there's.
Okay, all right, but
Mhm.
I would want to take a look at them side by side and see if what you're proposing is everything that we would need.
Well, what you asked me to do the last time was redline these things from the existing subdivision regulations, which I have done. I just told you, I'll say it again. I did not look at 325, and if 325 has redundancies and conflicts, that's the reason it needs to go. because your governing document is and always has been.
Well,
the
maybe this is a
separate-
question for council then. If somehow 325 got promulgated as a bylaw that was voted on at town meeting, or is there an opportunity for our bylaws to have things that haven't been voted on at town meeting, or was it included as because other towns have it as in their bylaw, I don't want to endlessly speculate, but
Mhm.
sort of a interesting circumstance.
Yeah, I'd have to go actually back through the history and see. But the fact that chapter 325 curiously states for the history that it was adopted by the planning board and amended on certain dates and makes no reference to a town meeting vote, I think that suggests these were probably regulations that got forwarded to E-code for incorporation into, the master code documents, but they should have been identified as regulations as opposed to what gives the appearance of a bylaw.
Right, because bylaws are the laws that
Mhm.
town meeting, the governing body, decides to adopt or not. And just because our subdivision regulation happens to smell a lot like a zoning bylaw, doesn't mean that what was done is correct.
Right.
On the other hand, the E-code 360 is a good central organizational place to put something like this, but maybe it's mislabeled.
Right. And I think if
Go
we
ahead.
truly confirm that these are just regulations, I have seen with other communities that use E-code, I have seen like a separate section on regulations or, statutes and special acts, things like that. So they do have different categories. I think this was probably just miscategorized.
And ultimately, would our regulations want to exist in E-code 360 so anyone could access them throughout the entire world?
It's not a bad idea.
Well, one-stop shopping, right?
Mhm.
I wouldn't put regulations in a bylaw document. It's
It's a
confusing.
E-code 360. It's not I mean, we
Yeah.
have a problem with the subdivision regulation becoming a bylaw surreptitiously.
Yeah, but again, what the E360 document that we have is a compilation of the town's bylaws, not the town's regulations. That was
I know, Tom.
that
I
was
get
my
it.
separate, that was my separate intent, is to then create.
I know, it seems like there's a mistake. It's mislabeled. It was done incorrectly as a part of the E-code 360 original contract. But where we go from here is another question. Whether we get rid of it, like you suggest, or review it and change its designation to a regulation. Or review what you've done in relation to what's in place now.
I haven't done anything different other than take the existing regulations, which are in a separate document from 325, and updated it. Jesus.
Yes, but the E-code 360 section does have different things in it, right? It's got let's see.
I don't know that,
It's
Clark.
got diagrams, it's got details, it's got
Yeah, and so do the regulations. They're not attached here, but
well, I guess the question is it the exact same? Is our regulation the exact same thing as section 325 of the
I have
bylaw?
no idea.
And that's something, let's figure that out. And I don't think we're gonna figure it out tonight.
And again, Amy, I'm taking away some of these, and this is not an exercise in editing the substance of the bylaw, the regulation.
I mean, I'm not in favor of resolving this subdivision regulation bylaw tonight.
Okay, thank you.
I would favor that based on the length of time that we've been discussing this and the ambiguities that still seem to be present.
You're confusing things that don't need to be confused, but that's fine. You guys do what you want. That's fine. So then we'll table sections 9 through 12, and you decide what to do in the future. I will clean it up so that you'll have it and you can do what you want with it after tonight. All right, so thank you for passing all the others. I'll get a clean document to you and get to Cassandra so that it can be put up online and on this website, and you'll have it for going forward. All right. Do we have any other business tonight? Oh, Amy, you wanted to bring up a potential future bylaw. Amy has suggested a potential bylaw based on Wellesley has a very detailed outdoor lighting bylaw. And as I was going through the compilation of the bylaws that I distributed early today with all the changes, you know, all we say about lighting, you know, in the large home review, we have some language, you know, criteria that we review, but in the section 4 uses, we say everything will be dark sky compliant. I think there's a few words after that, but it's pretty much dark sky compliant, period. So we don't have a lot to say on the specifics or specific requirements or performance standards of outdoor lighting. So Amy, I'll let you have it, but she's, you know, I glanced at the one in Wellesley. It's very long. It's very, like most Wellesley bylaws, they're very detailed, very long. In my memo today, I suggested where you would add it if you wanted to add one, but Amy, I'll let you explain what your thinking is behind adopting something like that.
Amy, before you begin, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Since the regulations are a public hearing, could I just get clarification of whether or not the board would like to continue the public hearing to further discuss the last sections, or if you would like to close the public hearing and just move forward with the document as previously voted on?
Yeah, I would suggest if you're not ready to take up the subdivision sections relatively quickly, it would be better just to close this public hearing and set up a new public hearing to amend that. And in the
Yep,
meantime.
that makes
in the
sense.
meantime, what you will have is the existing subdivision regs in a separate document that's on.
That makes sense. That makes sense at this
And
point.
I'll make a motion, we close the public hearing regarding the regulations.
Second.
All in
Clark
favor?
Brewer, aye.
John Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
All right, great. Thank you for bringing that up, Cassandra.
Thank
My
you.
orders. All right, Amy, go ahead and share your thoughts about the outdoor lighting regulations and bylaw.
Thank you, Tom. So for quite some time, we have tossed around the idea and raised this set of issues associated with lighting. And there are 53 communities in Massachusetts that currently have dark sky lighting provisions. And I know from listening to some of the discussions that have gone on in other boards that there are concerns about the fact that we have basically limited, and very minor information about lighting systems. And so what I would like to propose is that we would have a formal discussion of how we feel about the prospect of having a dark sky, either being a dark sky community or having adopted one of the 53 different regulations that exist in different communities that fit Cohasset. And the reason that this is an issue is that, first off, we're not a poor community, and as a result, lights are left on indiscriminately, not intentionally, but indiscriminately. And as a result, community residents in neighborhoods complain about the fact that their neighbors' lights are on 24 hours a day. If it was a question of cost, it might be in terms of the cost of utilities, it might be some means by which regulation could control the utilization of excess electricity, but it isn't that. And most of the communities adopt the policy not just because of the fact that it is in some cases an irritant to neighbors, but that it is an environmentally sound principle. as a result, I would like to have the planning board consider this. And there's a number of things that can go along with the consideration of a dark sky program. Before I came here, I ran an energy efficiency program for which we changed out lights all over the state of Pennsylvania, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lights. That was actually
Outdoor lights, like
outdoor,
street lights.
street lights, signal lights, lights that were, there was moderations on buildings that were commercial, things which brought down the volume of electricity and also saved a lot of money for the communities that we were working in. I would like to explore further and perhaps bring 2 or 3 examples of what a sound dark sky exterior lighting program would, or a bylaw would look like.
Can I just ask Amy, are we talking about just construction, physical lights, the existing lights on a house? We're not talking about holiday lights, because we're dealing with that in Cohasset. We have
No, I was
houses-
going to say
Okay.
that there,
just lights that are there
well,
24/7, not Christmas time, holiday
Well,
time, whatever that is.
yeah. So the one thing that we do have to recognize is that we have a new situation when it comes to holiday lights. And I would not be surprised if it actually had an impact on you. It certainly had an impact on me and my household for 45 days where lights were on day and night. And they're very intense. They're not the little tiny ones, you know, that have a small shadow. It's much bigger than that. And so it's perfectly reasonable for people to have holiday lights, but to have them on 24 hours a day is a disturbance that has some legitimacy to be concerned about. But I don't want to go that far yet. What I want to do is actually find the right to right size a bylaw for us that achieves the objectives of neighborliness, achieves the objective of utilizing energy efficient equipment, and in that way, because we have such a wonderful sky setting, but it's very difficult to access. And if anybody was looking for any of the showy lights and the various kinds of changes in the sky over this last Christmas, people would recognize that we couldn't see anything because there were only lights on the ground.
Well, Amy, I have to say, I'm all for any lighting quality, lighting quantity improvements that improve neighbors in future houses and future projects and things that people want, like the 24/7 spotlight that somebody who's happens to be in Florida for 4 months out of the year. It's just awful for adjacent neighbors. And frankly, somebody who picks the wrong light bulb for their front porch light, but they leave it on all the time. That's awful too. And a lot of times neighbors don't want to go, hey, I really don't like your light bulb, because it seems kind of like get a life, pal. But it can have a huge impact. And I think any way we have something that we can point to that creates quality and thoughtfulness, I think is useful. Although people might think that their American rights are being violated, but I'm all for it.
Thank
What I
you.
put up-
I think it's great.
What I put up on the
I
screen-
think it should be a discussion for a future meeting.
Well, we're not going
Just
to
gonna
decide right now. It's just
No,
like
we're
yes or
certainly
no.
not, and I
Do you
think
think
we
it's
have to
worth
figure
pursuing
out.
or not?
Yeah, it's worth pursuing, and I think we need to be very, very specific to permanent lights on a structure. I don't think we can.
No,
be-
Rudolph.
I know Rudolph,
That
I
nose
think
is
we
too
need to
bright.
be very, yeah,
too
no,
bright.
yeah, and I think that we need to be careful. I know it's obnoxious and it's awful for some people to have those holiday lights going, but we have to remember that it's a temporary period of time, and I know it goes on for Some people, they start right after Thanksgiving and it goes on until after Christmas. But that is commercially driven and we need to remember that. It's not driven by people's personal beliefs. So, I think that this is something we need to table for later. I do believe that we need to have some kind of conversation about dark sky lights and how we define them in our bylaws. Seeing new construction in town, for us, particularly down on Jerusalem Road, some people are afraid of the dark. Okay, they moved
Sure.
from the city and now they leave their lights on all night long. So, you wake up and you think, oh my God, there's a fire in the neighborhood or something. But that is something we can discuss at a further period. We are
I
not going to
agree.
control those people. That's all I'm going to say. We need to figure out what kind of lights we would like to have. And,
Well-
Yeah, and then just so for reference, and I'll send you this link, this is Wellesley's, and like I said, Wellesley's been an inspiration for a lot of things I've written over the last 20 years for bylaws, but excruciatingly detailed and long, and but you get down through all of this,
Maybe that's what it
there,
needs.
there are exemptions, seasonal lighting of a temporary nature, so they exempt all that from all of this detailed regulation. But I'm sure Carolyn could find you other communities with something
Yeah.
a little less detailed, but these are like, look at the luminance and light trespass. This is pretty detailed illustrations, acceptable, unacceptable types of lighting. I'll send this along to, to help you get your discussion started, but.
One other outdoor lighting bylaw that I've worked with in the past, and it's a little bit more, I think, user-friendly than Wellesley's, is the town of Medway's. And they have exemptions for temporary lighting of flagpoles, things of that nature, or like public, if there's a public purpose or a public project going on, lighting related to that. But it does have a pretty easy application of light trespass onto adjoining properties.
Thank you.
Great.
I will look at it. One of the things that I'm going to also investigate is that some states and some agencies within states that have responsibilities for such things as energy conservation do have programs that help communities subsidize the cost of changing out the existing light systems that need to be corrected. So I'm going to be looking at that too.
Yeah, a town did upgrade a lot of the streetlights to LED a while ago
Yeah, long time.
to save energy, but that may not necessarily improve the light quality.
Amy, another example from the 50 some odd communities might be that willing to look at just from another spectrum, Wellesley and Medway would be the town of Townsend, and that's up on the northwest corner of Middlesex County. They've had one for years, and I think it's there was a lot of thought put into it, but that is a smaller out of the metropolitan area, smaller size community. So just from another perspective, that might provide a good example.
Thank you.
That's good. And all I would say is in the memo I wrote today, I just suggest where to put it. Particularly if you use something long like Wellesley's. The format, in the existing format of Article 4, I would just create a new subsection on it. It would be the easiest place to just fit it right in, however you do it. So, all right. Anything else? Do we have minutes or anything we have to deal with?
You do. You have minutes for December 18th.
Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
So moved to adopt and approve.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan,
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
and before we close off, there are 2 attendees. I'll ask one more time if anybody has any questions from the 2 people who are attending. If I don't see a hand raised, we'll conclude our meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, I just want to say that my resignation will be effective now, now that we've done these regulations. I'm not gonna hang around for the subdivision one, you know. We have subdivision regs in place, so it's not like there's void left to be filled, so. I want to thank you all for your help during the bylaw process in this last 5 years. I did not expect to come in, you know, I put my name out there the Thursday night before a Saturday election, got a whopping 37 votes, but I appreciate all the work we've done together, and you know, I'm wishing you all well in the future. But as I said in my resignation letter, I think, you know, given the nature of the work and finding somebody who wants to commit to the 5-year term, it's best to fill my spot now, let somebody get their feet wet, you know, before the election, which I guess is in May. Brigitte, you know, as the associate, it's traditional to step up. You step up, then you're looking at an election for a 5-year term in May. You know, it's a joint appointment between your board and the select board, but let the select board know, let this board know if you want to step up to this spot. I'll leave it to you guys to reorganize at your next meeting. And thank you all again. Carolyn, thank you for your help. Cassandra, you've both been great through this process and big help.
All the best to you, Tom. Thank you.
Yes.
All right.
Same.
Thank you,
And,
Tom.
Thank you,
Motion to
Tom.
adjourn, I'll
Thank you,
second.
Tom.
Before
okay.
you adjourn, I just wanted clarification from the rest of the board. So you don't have anything scheduled for your next regularly scheduled meeting on the 22nd, provided you don't get an A&R in or there's nothing in the courts that needs discussion from Carolyn. I didn't know if you wanted to post or cancel that meeting or still have it.
Sure, no reason not to cancel it unless something comes up.
Agreed.
Yeah. Go ahead and cancel, unless something comes.
Do you have to post it?
Yeah, I sort of think we have to say, we're gonna cancel it. It's not something that can float out there. So I
No,
would
it
make a
can't.
recommendation that we cancel the meeting.
Cancel
and
the
then-
meeting.
Yeah.
No floating. Done.
Oh,
One or the other.
If something
or
were
the
to
other.
come in, if something were to come in and you were under a time constraint, you might have to post a meeting.
Sure, of course.
Right.
If there was something of the time constraint, we could move forward with that. But I just
Your-
figured we
and
could
your deadline
decide that now.
Your deadline for posting for that meeting is what, 2 days before, 3 days before?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
48 hours, so.
Okay, all right. All right, so on the motion to adjourn, it's been seconded, I believe. All in favor? Political roll call.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, I.
And food, be shy.
Great.
Oh, hello.
Mhm.
Were you there all the time?
No, I wasn't. No, I joined kind of like half an hour ago, good half an hour ago.
It's
Good night,
to see-
everyone.
Good night.
All right, all.
Okay,
Thank
we'll
you.
see you in the future. Bye. Thank you, Tom.
Bye.